Okay, so welcome, welcome everybody. Uh, for, the, for those who've not been yet, what happens is I give a shortish talk, as short as I possibly can, and and then I let you at it. I usually make it quite wide, so you've got plenty of space to choose what you want to land on, and to agree or disagree with me. It's usually disagreeing with me, but that's fine. That's what I expect. And anyway, so are we entitled to our opinions? So when asked if people are entitled to their opinions, the answer is invariably yes, they are. So I've got to ask all hi, it's Ella. No, Ellie.
Yes.
Oh, wow. I laid myself open there for. Is it all people, all opinions? If we're entitled to our opinions, are we entitled to express our opinions? These are separate.
Well,
These are separate points, or are they? Actually, when I thought about the subject, I was stuck on the title. Perhaps there is a difference between are we entitled to our opinions versus are you entitled to your opinions? The first one, are we entitled to our opinions, usually gets, well, yes. The second one is, are you entitled to your opinions? We get, of course. So let's just have a look at the difference between opinions and facts. Opinions are supposedly subjective expressions based on personal feelings, beliefs, or preferences. They vary from person to person and are influenced by individual experiences, culture, and emotions. Examples could be strawberries ice cream is the best flavor, or blue is a calming color. Facts. Facts are said to be objective statements that can be verified and proven true or false. They are based on empirical evidence, scientific research, or universally accepted knowledge. Examples of facts, and I say this with those who know me with tongue in cheek. Um, Water boils at 100 degrees centigrade, 212 degrees Fahrenheit at sea level. Well, we know that's not exactly fact, because sea level measurements are subject to various factors, can affect their accuracy, etc., etc. Or the Earth orbits the sun. That's a fact. But it only is a fact if you're situated in the solar system, and in fact, everything circles everything else anyway in the universe. So it's said that while opinions are valid expressions of individual perspectives, facts provide a foundation for shared understanding. Well, not if people don't agree on the facts or what are facts. The argument about whether there are facts points to a seeming fact that there are facts, but there aren't. What in science, what in history, geography, psychology. A fact not universally agreed on, then one person's fact is someone else's opinion. Humans have the need to solve things. That's the role of science and philosophy, and in fact, every discipline. We can't, to everyone's satisfaction. What we are left with are strong opinions. And what seems to be a fact, though, is that it is almost impossible to change someone's opinions. There is a second strand to the discussion today. That is entitlement. What is entitlement? Is it inherent or intrinsic in human beings, or just in adults? Children? Who says so? Entitlement is codified in legal frameworks such as constitutions, laws, and international agreements. These legal entitlements establish rights and protection for individuals and groups, ranging from basic human rights, whatever that is, to specific entitlements related to property, employment, education, etc. From a philosophical standpoint, entitlements are often grounded in theories of justice, rights, and ethics. Philosophers such as John Locke and Immanuel Kant have explored the concept of natural rights, arguing that individuals possess inherent entitlements based on principles of autonomy, equality, and dignity. Utilitarian philosophers like Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill have emphasized the importance of maximizing overall well-being and happiness, which may entail certain entitlements for individuals. Note, but not for everyone, i.e. not all individuals. Now, these are for idealistic situations in Western societies. Even so, are we entitled to any action? Obviously not. So why entitled to opinions? Surely opinions, such as vaccinations are harmful, they can cause autism, have effects that are as bad as physical action. It's unacceptable to say that one doesn't respect the human rights of everyone, since that is elevating oneself above others. But where does that leave us in our opinions? Are all people equal in all senses? Are people equal to their president or their king or queen? Do people's opinion matter when they express their views about such systems? You are entitled to your opinions, but not to your own facts. Many have claimed this, including Daniel Patrick Moynihan. Can opinions ever be facts? Are all facts just opinions? How can anything that is not fact be other than an opinion? In fact, the narrower the context, the more of an opinion it is. For example, it's 6 o'clock. No, it's 6:01. According to cognitive psychologists, opinions are influenced by cognitive biases such as confirmation bias, that is the tendency to seek out information that confirms pre-existing beliefs, and motivated reasoning, a subconscious or conscious process by which one's emotions control the evidence supported or dismissed. Opinions, while they may be claimed to apply to the future, are always based upon the past, to knowledge and information. We can see this in development psychology, where Piaget's theory of cognitive development suggests that children's opinions become increasingly sophisticated as they mature and gain the ability to engage in abstract reasoning and perspective taking. Well, obviously, development in anything is based on the past. And what is interpretation other than an opinion? Different interpretations of Hegel, I always mention Hegel to annoy some people here, different interpretations of Hegel are simply opinions about the interpreting of original Hegel in German. And this applies even when people are reading him or Heidegger in the original. What makes one opinion better than another opinion about a text or about art, in fact? So now we are stuck with my possible opinion as to whether there are only opinions. If there are opinions, they must be opinions of something. The covert understanding being that there is something that is fact. Is there anything in science that is absolutely exact? Everything is approximate. If that is so, then anything that is approximate can surely, when you get down to it, be an opinion. The age of information is a godsend for the proliferation of opinions. Everybody has an opinion about everything, all of which are facts according to the proliferator. The fact that tens of thousands, apparently, of bogus research papers are being published in journals and is worsening every year is a sign of an urge to have recognition, and also a sign of more opinions being let loose on people who cannot discern the bogus from the genuine. I'm wondering if there's a difference between an opinion and a belief, apart from a purely semantic choice, where an opinion is a weaker way of stating a belief. For example, my opinion is that vaccinations are harmful versus I believe that vaccinations are harmful, or I'm entitled to my opinion versus I'm entitled to my belief. If we think of self-help programs, which are succinct versions of subjectivity, where the recipe is to first believe in oneself before worrying about the world. Your opinions are as good as anyone else's opinions, is the mantra. This inculcates extreme subjectivity, which is utterly self-centered, where one's opinions are better for them than anyone else's. Self-help ideas are very individualistic, selfish, redolent of the American dream, which is that anyone can accomplish anything by wishing it and working for it. It might be tempting to dismiss opinions as relativism, the view that one way of knowing is as good as another, that one's personal truth trumps objective reality. But that is not what I am suggesting. Relativism could only be discerned from above, from a mythical observer of all observers, a point of view where everyone, which is in fact a view from nowhere. Instead, the fact that each observer, i.e. each one of us, has a different vantage point is an inescapable fact of life that does not allow for a collective view, and neither can it tolerate an objective reality. Opinions can only be subjective. How then can we propose that any opinions are not entitled to be held? Art can only be of and by an opinion. Surely it is opinion that a certain piece of art is good or not good. Same goes for music, even if there is a universal opinion. But no opinion is universal, and in fact changes over time. One of the most popular operas, The Barber of Seville by Rossini, was hated when first performed in 1816 and was met with hissing and booing. Even the most comfortable and most loved staples of our current repertoire, including Brahms, Chopin, Debussy, Tchaikovsky, had been condemned by contemporary critics in the very same way. Even Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, possibly the most popular classical work of all, was damned as odious mewing and not music, decades after its premiere. Beauty is an opinion. Attraction is an opinion. Are we entitled to have those opinions? How are we doing with time? Not too good. Philosophers have explored the concept of entitlement to our own opinions from various perspectives, often touching upon the importance of freedom of thought and expression. For example, while individuals may have the right to their own opinions, they also have a responsibility to form their opinions based on sound reasoning, evidence, and critical thinking. This is a very airy-fairy, in fact, quite meaningless in any way that is not an ideal. It is easier, by the way, for philosophers to discuss the concept of entitlement within broader discussions of justice, rights, ethics, and political philosophers. Some have had a difficult time. Take Marx, please. Take Marx. Marx's writings did not provide a comprehensive theory of freedom of thought and expression, but his emphasis on social change, class struggle, and the empowerment of oppressed groups might possibly suggest a more tolerant stance towards differing opinions. Whatever Stalin professed regarding Marx's vision of a socialist society that implied the promotion of individual liberties and the recognition of diverse viewpoints, Stalin's authoritarian regime relied on suppression and control to maintain its grip on power. No entitlement of differing views there. Very, very briefly, I'm going to go through some philosophers who've combined to contribute to the discourse on entitlement, but did not have to go beyond theory. Now, John Locke is perhaps best known for his theories of natural rights and the social contract. Individuals have natural rights to life, liberty, and property, and that government exists to protect these rights. Kant's moral philosophy emphasizes the importance of rational autonomy and human dignity. He argues that individuals have inherent worth and are entitled to certain rights and freedoms by virtue of their rational nature. Kant's notion of moral entitlement is grounded in the categorical imperative, which demands respect for the autonomy of others. There's Mill was a proponent of utilitarianism, a moral theory that seeks to maximize overall happiness and well-being. He defends the importance of individual freedom and autonomy, arguing that individuals are entitled to pursue their own interests as long as they don't harm others. There's a big problem here, of course, is that one individual's freedom will clash with another individual's freedom. There was Rousseau, whose political philosophy explores the nature of social contracts and the foundations of legitimate authority. Rousseau argues that individuals are entitled to certain rights and freedoms within a just society, and that legitimate political authority arises from the consent of the government. There was John Rawls, known for his theory of justice as fairness. Rawls argues that a just society is one that ensures the greatest possible liberty for all individuals, while also addressing social and economic inequalities through principle of distributive justice. Now, what about philosophers who argued against natural rights? There was Thomas Hobbes, his theory that stands in contrast to the notion of natural rights. He considered the natural state of humanity as a state of nature characterized by a war of all against all, where life is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Jeremy Bentham was a utilitarian philosopher who criticized the concept of natural rights. He argued that rights are not inherent or God-given, but are instead artificial constructs created by society to promote utility or the greatest happiness of the greatest number. There's Marx that I mentioned. He rejected the idea of natural rights as ideological constructs that serve to perpetuate social inequality and exploitation. He believed that true freedom and justice could only be achieved through the abolition of private property and the establishment of a classless society. Foucault criticized the concept of natural right as part of his broader analysis of power and knowledge. He argued that discussing rights served as mechanisms of social control and normalization, reinforcing dominant ideologies, justifying and perpetuating systems of oppression and exclusion. And now let's look at religion for a couple of seconds, because they're big on rights, or the opposite actually. Theistic religions. There are two ways of looking at them. In theory, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam affirm the inherent dignity and worth of human beings as created by a divine being, created in the image of God, or in accordance with divine law, in which rights and duties are grounded in the commands of will of God, and moral obligations stem from obedience to divine authority rather than inherent human rights. Eastern religions are different. In Hinduism, for example, the concept of dharma encompasses one's duties and responsibilities within the social and cosmic order, rather than individual rights as understood in Western philosophy. Similarly, Buddhist teachings emphasize compassion, non-harm, and interconnectedness, which may lead to a different understanding of ethics and rights compared to the concepts of natural rights. I will end with AI, as I always mention AI, especially when Terry's here. I have to. And so, does AI have opinions? Is it possible to give AI the chance of having opinions? Could AI have free will? Can one give AI choices? If so, how strongly would it defend them? If AI had opinions, they could be different from ours, stronger than ours, better formed because of more information than we have, be able to form them more efficiently than we could. Also, there could be different opinions for different AI systems. Imagine a Zoom meeting like this one, in which each attendee would be an AI model. Would it be of a higher, deeper version of what we achieve here? Obviously not. I mean, look at everybody here. Could there be conclusions to all queries and arguments? We never get to a conclusion, obviously. We can't. But could AI, all together, chatting and beating each other up, or would they all get nervous breakdowns? And here I stop, and not bad with the time, and I throw open to those who wish to state their opinions. So, Josh, I can't see you walking. Come back. That's it. Oh, okay. Now I feel better. Sorry, before you start, could I please ask all of you to keep your comments, say to within like 5 minutes or so that you can have another go later. Thank you very much. Josh.
You said about relativism that it implies a view from above, and I don't quite see that because, for example, if you take a relativistic view of scientific truth like that of Thomas Kuhn's, I mean, there's no overarching perspective from which he's making these claims. It's more of a pragmatic kind of immersion in the context of doing or of investigating questions that one proceeds relativistically, and that kind of relativism doesn't imply that there is no way of ascertaining what is more or less truth. It's simply arguing that when we do that, we're doing it within the context of a framework, of an intersubjective framework of understanding, and that those are contingent, and they're likely to evolve. And so the upshot of that way of thinking about the nature of something like scientific truth or fact is that it shares with with opinion the sense that there's no there is no truth is determined in relation to human practices that are oriented toward particular goals. And what it means for something to be true or to be a fact itself has to do with how the ways in which we are going about, functioning in the world together. And as those ways change and evolve, the nature of what we consider to be fact also changes. The sense of it, the sense of it, not whether something is true or false, makes sense within a logical framework. But those frameworks themselves, when they change, they don't change in a manner that can be considered to be either true or false. It's more like turning a picture on its head or changing the subject a little bit, rather than determining something that previously had been considered true now to be false. So, if one buys into that way of looking at something like truth, then one can kind of unite the notion of opinion, the notion of literary fiction as having a truth, and as well as what we call facts. But I don't want to, in starting off talking about relativism, I don't want to end with the notion that one can't end up with some kind of a sense of a progress. But there are different ways of thinking about it, and you don't have to think about it exclusively in terms of sort of an accumulative notion of factual truth, as if there's some sort of the world out there just is nailed down in a certain respect, and all we're doing is trying to capture in some way to mirror it. Okay, thanks.
Josh, your second sentence, you said
yes.
More or less true. At that point, you should have stopped, because more or less true is exactly the point I'm making. More or less true is not true. More or less fact is not fact. You have to cut out the more or less, and you can't.
But I think you can. It's a logical system. There is true or there is not true. There's a precision there, but the precision only works within a system. But systems themselves, human systems, intersubjective social systems, which is how science functions, yeah. As they evolve, as the purposes, of those systems change, then more or less, it's not so much more or less, but qualitative changes in the sense of what it means for something to be accurate or more or less true. So it's not a quantitative more or less at that level. It's a different way of having to think about what it means when we shift our whole perspective on something, then you're outside of that venue, of that realm of more or less accurate, more or less true. It's a different vocabulary one needs at that point, I think.
That's a problem. That means that truth changes, that my opinion is true and you're in a different framework, that your opinion is true. That's relativism. But that, okay, you can carry on walking. It's very healthy. You're going to come back. You're going to come
Okay.
back at me later. But thank you.
Okay.
That was very nice. You trod on every one of my toes while you were talking, by the way.
Yeah, I try.
This time you succeeded. You really did. Thank you. Richard.
Sorry, I muted myself because I can hear Genesis listening to the television next door. I'm unmuted now. Right. Before I start, can I say to anyone who hasn't been on here before that if they want to raise their hand, if they go to the bottom of the screen, they drop the cursor to the bottom of the screen, there's reactions there. And one of the commands is to raise and lower hand. Okay, right. Now, the first time I really thought about this, I mean, when I was a student, I always presumed free speech was essential for all of us. I mean, I've been to parties, and the best thing of all is when you get off with a really attractive girl. But the next best thing is when you all start arguing in the kitchen, and you can all be friendly, but you're having a really good intellectual argument from different viewpoints. And the different viewpoints, the more different they are, the better it is. That's fine when you're young. However, Foucault is right. There is a certain amount of power. You were a lecturer, I was a lecturer, probably about 3/4 of the people here have lectured on various subjects. When you've acquired knowledge in some area, if you're talking to students, you do expect them to listen first. You have to have a structure about the conversation. Otherwise, say you've got 60 students in the lecture hall, everybody will be shouting out their opinions. Then when I retired and I came on the internet as a hobby, if you like, rather than purely nearly always for academic reasons, I found somebody who obviously wasn't terribly well educated entering into a conversation. I can't remember what it was. It could have been politics. It could have been something that verged on philosophy, and saying, well, everybody's entitled to their own opinions. And I said, yes, but some opinions are more informed than others. And said, if you say something about mathematics and you've got an O level, and I say something about it and I've got a doctorate, one would expect my opinion to be slightly more informed than yours. And so therefore one has to be careful. Okay, you talked about facts. I think that this is, I'm sorry, I've mentioned parallax before, but I think this is a case of parallax. And it depends. We've all got our own opinions. We all stand in different positions. But if you think of a cathedral spire, that was put up in the Middle Ages so that people could identify where they were. I mean, the countryside didn't have signposts everywhere. It may have had a few stones marking the miles to, say, London or Antwerp or wherever, but they didn't have that many of them. The Romans put up some. There were some Roman roads. Everything else, it was trackless waste pretty well. However, you could go from one cathedral to another with luck and not too many forests. Now, the actual cathedral is there, the spire is there, but we're all coming from different directions. We all see a different approach. Therefore, it's going to be different. And truth, if you like, is like that cathedral spire. We're all tracing it. And I know you and I disagree, but this is where I take the Kantian perspective. It does help to put forward your arguments, maybe more than just one or two, thesis and antithesis, but hopefully a synthesis will grade it out. However, we then get to the argument, which I've had with, as an atheist, with people who believe in something, where particularly American theists tend to say that, say, theory of evolution is just a theory. So my theory about God having started the earth so many thousand years ago, etc., that goes against geology and biology, is just as good as something based on geology and biology. If you look at the scientific method, it's based on Popper's falsification. If you can't falsify something, if you don't examine every theory and see if you can falsify it, then it's not a theory. It's just an opinion. An opinion in that case is pretty well nothing. So therefore, proof may not be exact. It may not be actual proof of something existing, because with a scientific theory, you expect to be able to throw one aside, well, not throw it aside totally, but you expect to be able to change it as you find out new ideas. Okay. Oh, yes, you went into AI. Yes, obviously, once again, it's power. AI depends on who programmed the AI program. All programs are biased to some extent by what their programmers believe. However, the computer itself is not at fault. It's a programmer that's at fault. Right, I've talked enough. I'll stop.
Thank you very much, Richard. There's a lot there. I'm still puzzled, but I just need to ask you: have you ever changed anybody's opinion about anything?
I hope that I changed some of my students' opinions about some things to do with computing, maths, and possibly logic, and possibly philosophy. Therefore, I hope I got some of them to take a critical view rather than an emotional standpoint. I hope, and examine everything from every case. Yes, I think that possibly historically, when someone says something that they have no idea about history and they make something that is definitely fallacious, I hope I've managed to point them towards sources where they can identify it. But I'm not saying the sources are necessarily going to be true, because say if we understand what Messalina was like, we are relying on Roman authors who were A, living sometime after she died, and B, were anti the idea of powerful women. It's not just Messalina. You can say any of the females who had power. The same through most of history. You'll find, I mean, after all, was Richard III the twisted bastard that he's made out to be, or was he in fact one of the most enlightened monarchs of the time? If you look at the laws that were passed, you could argue that he was quite enlightened. If you go on the idea, which was possibly Tudor propaganda about him murdering his nephews, but even if he murdered his nephews, at that time, murdering your nephews for power wasn't totally a bad thing. Nearly all of the rulers were ready to do at least that. I mean, some of them murdered their own sons.
That's another long topic about not knowledge, etc., etc. But thank you very much, Richard. Yeah, Michael.
Let me tell first what I'm not going to discuss.
Okay.
I'm not going to discuss the matter of objective scientific truths, facts, and so on, because I consider this as a separate topic, and it's a very big one. So I want to take a very subjective viewpoint. So I know about my own opinions, right? And if I assume, at least tentatively, that you all, that all other people are not just figments of my imagination, that they really do exist, then by analogy, I assume that they also have their own opinions. And what I want to discuss is how our opinions are related to each other, not to the scientific truths, facts, and so on, but to each other. So first, at least I see it this way, that my opinions informed by the evidence that I have. Again, leaving aside how this evidence is related to like scientific tools. Anything that I subjectively accept as the evidence. You may have your own evidence, may be different from mine. But this does not mean that your evidence is wrong and mine is right, because we may just see the same thing like this cathedral, but from different points, right? And we see this differently, but it still could be could represent the same thing. So I cannot expect that our opinions are always the same or identical to accept that they are like compatible. So my idea is broader, that our opinions can be compatible if when we think about any specific decisions or specific actions. This could be like scientific measurement or observation that we all could expect the same outcomes and agree that it shows this, or some practical actions. So if you have a different opinion about something, but you agree that what I am doing is the right thing to do, and I agree that what you are doing is the right thing to do for you, then our opinions are compatible. Although they can be different. And this is maybe the point when all this more or less right, all these different degrees of truth, but they come to binary choice, because if you and I have to make decisions, it's either this or that. It's either do this or not do this. It's binary. So it's like a collapse of wave function in quantum mechanics. So before this point, you could think whatever you wanted. I could think whatever I wanted. But if we both agree with this choice, that's binary. Even if we agree with this for different reasons. And what is important here is that we, as a group or as a society, to function, most of our opinions have to be compatible in this broad sense. So even if we don't agree on everything, if we don't agree almost on everything, but I don't have a problem with what you are doing, and you don't have a problem with what I am doing, then we can act together as a society, we can accomplish some shared goals, and it works more or less. But if we cannot agree on what we are doing, then we have a problem. And sometimes it's a big problem. Sometimes it's a problem that is leading to wars or to like major conflicts. Again, I'm expressing only my subjective opinion that when we don't agree on something that to the level that it's not compatible, so when it's expressed in terms of specific practical actions, then we have to discuss it more. We have to expand or examine more evidence, and we have to maybe enforce certain rules of these discussions to prevent them go off rail. But we have to discuss it and try not to agree, but at least to reach the level of compatibility between our disagreements. And I'm probably running out of time. Maybe I'll try to raise my hand later and give you a very specific and encouraging example of how we could do this in practice. And related to the current conflict between Israel and Hamas, by the way. But I wanted to make briefly another point about AIs. So what people are usually missing in these discussions that all our eyes, human intelligence, are A's. They're artificial. Our intelligences are created. They are created by our environment, by information in various kinds, not only this logical and scientific information that we are getting from our parents, from other people, from books, whatever. We all are AIs. But we all have, of course, the same hardware, so to say, biological hardware. And what we are talking now about intelligence that is developed on different hardware, but it's still informed by the same information that we have, but it can be more informed. And so it can be more powerful. It can have access to the knowledge from the whole internet. And that's potentially a problem. So how can we coexist with intelligence which is so vastly more informed and more powerful than ours? And I see a big potential problem in this. But let me stop at this.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Michael. Most of it I agreed with. I've forgotten now what I didn't agree with. That's only part of it. No, yes, you were speaking about an ideal world where people have a nice discussion and they say you're right, okay, I'm right, and we can agree. But mostly it doesn't work like that. It works here where we all meet together, but it doesn't work a lot in real life when you have real arguments and you will not agree. You're prepared to beat each other up. That's not an ideal world, and here's the problem. But anyway, thank you very much, and you can come on again whenever Debbie, do you mind if I just move on to Dave because he's new and
No problem at all.
and it's only fair. Is that all right with everybody? Thank you, Dave. Since you're new, you have the privilege of going for it now.
Did I hear Dave?
You did indeed.
That's very kind of you, sir. And I find this a very enlightening and stimulating group. I would like to talk about entitlement and opinion. To me, they're two different things, although I know we're all entitled to our opinion. But entitlement, to me, I always come up with what my conservative friends worry about, that the government's going to take my money and give it to somebody else. And if they want more money, they should just go out and get another job. But I think there's an interesting study in Oakland, California, and after I talk, and I'll disappear and I'll find it and I'll put it in chat, that they gave, I think, 300 people a guaranteed income of $500 a month. And no, they just didn't sit around and get fat, dumb, and happy and collect the money. No, employment actually increased, and I think the overall wealth, well-doing of the people also increased. And now they're ready to start phase 2 of the experiment. And this Friday night here in the big city of Tacoma, I think there's a nationwide movement or whatever they're going from place to place talking about this, and they're going to be speaking at campus here. So that's entitlement. Now, opinion. Yeah, we all get the opinions, but I would caution you, a person that says, you know, the sun comes up in the west and it sets in the east. I think that is wrong. And I think when people spout wrong opinions, it is dangerous because there will always be followers. I'll give you an example. We have a guy here I call the Orange Jesus, and I think you probably know who I'm talking about, who in the end of 2020, after it was evident he didn't win the election, he called people to Washington, D.C. to straighten things out. And that morning, he geared them all up and sent them to the Capitol building to have a riot and try to stop the transition of power. Several people were killed. About 50 police officers, as I recall, our Capitol Police, were injured. And the day before, and several of the people that did it were policemen and veterans. If asked the day before, would you take a flagpole and club a policeman? Well, hell no. Would you ask them the day after, would they do that? Oh, hell no. But that day, in mob mentality, they did it. There's no arguing about that. To say, oh, they were just tourists, they were having a good time. No, it was a riot. And the same Orange Jesus is now saying, if I'm not elected, there's going to be a bloodbath. Oh, and furthermore, some of his followers, it became clear he doesn't like minorities. So one guy went down to El Paso, Texas, to a Walmart and started killing Mexicans. And another guy went to Richmond, Virginia, and started killing Negroes inside a church. Another follower went up to, I think, New York State, to a black neighborhood, started killing Negroes in a grocery store. And he'll say, well, I didn't do it. I didn't tell him to do that. No, but he brought up base desires and brought out the worst of us. And I think the guy needs to be thrown in jail today to silence him, because as long as he starts talking about bloodbath, 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 there's going to be a bloodbath. And we better be smart enough to realize that is going to happen, because he has followers that do what he says. And somebody mentioned vaccines. Okay, COVID arrived and 1 million people died. But they said, well, the vaccine's killing people. Yeah, because the vaccine is not perfect. It's 95, 99, whatever percent perfect, but there's always going to be exceptions. And some of the people that took the vaccine did die. Yes, that's true. But if there was no vaccine, 3 million people have died. And to this very day, there are still people dying from COVID, twice as many Republicans as Democrats, if you catch my drift. And people say, well, there wasn't adequate testing. Yeah, but 3 years later, there's no thing about adequate testing. And when people have dangerous opinions, they should be censored. Enough from Lake Wobegon. And I'll put it in the chat about the Oakland study. Thank you all very much, and for giving me a privilege. And now you have to put up with Carrie. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Dave.
I think it's Debbie's turn.
Yes, I know. Debbie.
Yeah, my hand fell off.
Your hand fell off. That
Yeah,
could be
magically.
very dodgy. Debbie, but listen, I thought you might be so hurt that you decided not to talk.
No, I'm still gonna try and contribute my small contribution,
Okay.
my opinion
Yeah.
or comment. Yeah, I wanted to talk about the expression "I'm entitled to my opinion" and this entitlement to opinions that we're all talking about, but not in the sense of some sort of inane human entitlement as autonomous and free beings, but as what happens, what does it mean when we say, I'm entitled to my own opinion? And I think, I think that the usage of this expression is often used to shield unsupported position. You know, you're entitled to your opinion doesn't mean that you're right or that anyone needs to take your opinion seriously. So there is some sort of, when we use it, we know that opinions are subjective judgments, or that's how we can define an opinion, and it's a viewpoint. And when someone claims that they are entitled to their own opinion, it's often because they're trying to shield or to hide factually incorrect assertions, as there's not much basis to what they think. Also, that's in relation to also what Richard said, the second point of when people say, I'm entitled to my opinion, it's also, there is, I think, there is a difference between not all opinions are equal. For example, expert opinions that are evidence-based have much more significant and are much more reliable and based on on evidence than non-expert opinions. So to suggest that that I'm entitled to my opinion suggests that their opinion, a non-expert opinion, is just as valid as an expert opinion. And I don't agree with that. There should be some sort of basis to base an opinion. Otherwise, there is no why would you say that? Why would you hold it so dearly? And the third point with saying I'm entitled to my opinion, I think it also closes us to more dialogue and talk. We should all be open to changing our minds if the evidence suggests that we should. So I'm entitled to my opinion is essentially an admission that they can't actually justify the position, but yet then and also not willing to entertain the a contradictory evidence or other viewpoints. So I'm taking this take in critical thinking in what does it mean that you are entitled to an opinion, and not all opinions are the same, and we should always be open to criticism and to not use this I'm entitled to my opinion like a get out of jail card every time there could be evidence contradicting our biases, and not keeping to this cognitive dissonance at all costs. So this is my little take on opinions and entitlement in a more critical and more practical way. That's it.
Thank you very much, Debbie. To point out something about evidence and experts. I've been spending the last few years looking at inverted commas evidence of inverted commas experts, and I've been quite shocked by experts who have knowledge which I've, or what they say, which I find absolutely appalling, according to my opinion, according to my evidence, which are looking at their evidence. I can't see how they get to what they're getting at from the evidence that they're putting out. So I'm much
experts
more...
can be wrong, and that's exactly the point. That's if they use and say this is my opinion, I'm entitled to it, and they hold it and do not research more, then their evidence is it should be falsifiable, just like
true.
Richard said before. When you're saying I'm entitled to my opinion, you're closing a discussion, you're closing a dialogue, and means that is my opinion and that's it. Yeah, so and I could say anything, and then everything is relative, but it's also trivial. That if it has no meaning or no evidence, or so it's just yours, and it stays yours, and that's it.
But Debbie, no expert will say this is my opinion. So this is a fact. I can talk about string theory. No string theorist will say this is my opinion. He'll tell you this is the way it is, and I can prove it, and he'll give the evidence. And you know, I mean, some of it is absolute balderdash. So, not just that, but just you got, there's a problem when you rely on experts, when you find out they're experts, but it basically means very, very little apart from the fact that they're experts. But I think that's my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's a problem, because that's what happened with Brexit. Of course, we've had enough with experts. That's also a problem with completely weakening experts who have studied, who have some more knowledge than people who have not. So that could be a fact, which somebody who has studied a certain subject has more information than somebody who hasn't. And of course, if it's in an academic an academic's situation and not just somebody on the internet. But that's of course the critical thinking. What is the evidence? For example, I've just heard noise in my house, and my opinion, it's a ghost. And somebody else would say, my opinion, it's a cat. So it could, I don't know. So, and I happen to have a cat in the house. So it would be more evidence-based to probably assume that it's the cat that made the noise and not a ghost, because I would have to show evidence of existence of ghosts, which at the moment I don't have, apart from the noise.
Okay.
That so the thing is the evidence, and what is the evidence? That I think is a good question, but that is, I think, perhaps a scientific question, how to get to the bottom of facts which can be changed. And
Well,
that's why you have peer reviews. That's why it's a very, very strict method of obtaining knowledge, which could be wrong as well, as long as it's falsifiable.
Okay, fair enough. That's a very, very easy topic you just started. Thank you very much.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you. Kerry, thank you
All
for
right.
waiting.
Oh, no problem. Ron, thank you for another fantastic topic here to discuss, and your thorough explanation in the beginning. I always appreciate you moving stepwise through your thought process. It makes commenting a lot easier. Although there's too much again to comment on. I'm going to start with, I think there's two kinds of opinions, at least. One is this idea that I think most people are talking about, these narratives, visions, worldviews, or constructions, that help us kind of negotiate the world. And then there's also our preferences. I mean, in common parlance, a lot of people will talk about that. And I guess in a way, it kind of parallels the whole analytic claim versus synthetic claim. If I say I like vanilla ice cream over chocolate, I mean, yeah, I think we can say that's probably a true statement as long as I actually believe that. The other part in terms of whether there's an objective reality, maybe there is, maybe there isn't. Either way, we don't have access to it. And a lot of people I hear going back to Popper, hero of mine, except you can't prove that you've ever falsified anybody's hypothesis, right? That's a big problem. And that goes to Ron's point about the number of claims in the published literature that can't be reproduced. I recently read an article, basically through a mathematical analysis, the authors came to the conclusion that most published studies are false. Interesting claim, but I would say, go back through time and how many scientific claims are still held. That's going to be probably the state of all the claims that are being, trumpeted about now as being absolutely true. But moving on from there, where we get our opinions and whether, can we not have opinions? That's the other way, flip the argument on its head. I think we're kind of stuck with having to have something to work with if we're going to actually navigate through the world. And then the question is, what status do they have? And how we're going to evaluate that. This idea of entitlements, or that my ability to hold an opinion is a privilege, that's a little bit scary. Because if individual opinions are frowned upon, what's the alternative? Are we going to have state-sanctioned opinions? Are we going to have otherwise curated opinions? Are they going to be by consensus? Or, many people actually delegate their opinion process, just like they do their worldviews, to some trusted source. And then, of course, we have various conflicts between the sources that are deemed authoritative and whatnot, and that leads to huge amounts of conflict. Regarding rights, I mean, Ron, I think I'm going to agree with you that rights are fictional. You know, the only real rights I've been able to identify is that once we're born, we have the right to die, apparently. Even that one I'm not so sure about. But we also have the right to try within our limits. So there, I'm going to say we are entitled to action. Regarding AI, you know, AI, I don't know if it makes or forms opinions as much as it forms conclusions, but more data does not necessarily mean that you're getting better conclusions out of it. Garbage in, garbage out. You know, I recently read a report of an AI that when given the choice over offending an individual or starting a nuclear war, opted for the nuclear war. And people are like, ooh, that's kind of a bad result. You should tweak this thing a little bit more. But yeah, an informed opinion also, not necessarily a correct opinion. Yeah, so you know, and regarding science, I know there's a lot of respect here for science, and I'm a big fan myself, but it's a value-driven process, and it's a narrative, and it's a pragmatic process. It's not truth, right? I mean, if we can't agree on the timing of events between two individuals, depending on their relative speeds, we're going to have a hard time agreeing on anything else as an absolute fact. And I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kerry. You asked a question that I had to stop and think about. You asked, can we not have opinions? Well, that's a very good question. And I realize, no, you can't not. At that very second, I had an opinion about that we can't have opinions. So I tried to not have an opinion and I realized I can't do it. So I have to think about that. It's like, can I think about nothing? No, I can't. It's pretty good. Thank you. Thank you very much. George, do you mind if I just move on to Peter because he's new here and I think it's only fair we move him up a bit. Is that all right with you?
Okay.
Thank you. Peter, welcome.
Thank you very much, Ron. Thanks. I'm not going to say much because being new here, I want to listen to everybody. They feel of what the group's like. But I'd just like to pick up briefly on relativism. You mentioned it yourself several times in a kind of pejorative way, I thought. And it's often got, I don't think it gets a bad press. It's often got the word abject in front of it, you know, or hapless relativism, you know, the sense that we're just stuck in our own views and it's not going to go anywhere. And it's just an invalid way of thinking. Well, I'm not so sure about that. I have to say that I struggle to I struggle to think of any statement about the world that isn't in some way supported by other statements, or supported by a framework, or supported by a paradigm, a Kuhnian type paradigm, or able to be, or needing to be justified. I mean, if we just take a simple example, like a factual example, like today's Sunday. Today's Sunday. I mean, one would think that's pretty straightforward, wouldn't one? But you know, how do I know that today's Sunday? Well, okay, I can look in my diary. That tells me today's Sunday, Sunday the 7th. But is that a good way of judging the day? Some might say it's not. Maybe there's a better way. Maybe looking in the newspaper is a better way. Okay, well, we look in the newspaper, but then that indeed could be a challenge that maybe I don't really know what I'm talking about until I look in some sort of almanac, and on and on and on it will go in a regression, kind of a regressive way. So, you know, you might think, well, that's a bit silly, really. And that really is the point. It is silly. We can make these chains of explanations silly. And it is perhaps the context within which these statements are made, which gives the justification for them, and gives us the truth effect. And that's what I think we're talking about when we talk about something being true, something being factual. We are talking about it being true within a context, true within a paradigm, true within a framework, true within a manner of speaking, and thus it makes no sense to question it or judge it. But But of course we could do. We could. Every statement about the world can be challenged and would need justification. And that really kind of points us towards a pretty skeptical stance. And I'll come clean now, because I regard myself as a Pyrrhonist. A Pyrrhonist in terms of epistemology, a Pyrrhonist empiricist. No, we all know the kind of standard skepticism, the kind of postmodern type of skepticism, where they say the truth is there is no truth, and give you lots of reasons why there is no truth. Some of those I've just used. And then expect one to do certain things or not do other things. As a colleague of mine got a reputation by arguing that you couldn't do history in conditions of postmodernity anymore, because we all know about perspectives and so on, and it really did away with the objective grounding of history. Therefore, you shouldn't do it. But there's another type of skepticism which is kind of, in a sense, a bit more radical than that, and in another sense, it takes us out of skepticism. So we could say, well, and this is the Pyrrhonist position, say that actually I don't even know really whether we can find truth or not. All I know is tonight, around the table here in this discussion, we probably can't if we would spend the time working on it. Tomorrow might be different. So let's not make kind of universalist claims, but let's just say it appears tonight that we can't make sense of the world objectively. So the question then comes, well, how do we live our lives if we can't? I mean, and certainly lots of people would especially those who regard relativism as being dangerous or abject or whatever, would say we can't. But this is where we can move forward positively, because if we don't even know whether we can find truth in the world or not, then all we can do, unless we just want to remain silent, all we can do is just rely on our senses and the sense that we can make of those senses. In other words, all we can rely on is a kind of an approach to the world that we could easily call empiricist approach to the world, which actually underpins all our modern scientific, rational ways of thinking, our modern thinking, and has done since early modern period, since the Renaissance and on into the Enlightenment. But it isn't really true. I mean, a Pyrrhonist, this is where I'll stop really, a Pyrrhonist is happy to believe that things are true, so long as you don't require the Pyrrhonist to believe that they really, really are true. So yeah, okay, we can have truth, we can have certainty up to a point, and only within a certain customs and habits of thought, etc., etc. Thanks very much. That's all I'm going to say.
Thank you very much, Pete. I think Anne summed it up very well. It just flashed across. Reality is in the eye of the beholder, and I agree with that. I agree with that 100%. In other words, there is no such thing as pure reality, because we all see reality in a different way. And then if we all have opinion about reality, well, there you have it. Then it is definitely in the eye of the beholder. Yes, definitely. But I don't see the chat. I just see something that flashes across, and that hit me because I happen to agree with it. So thank you, Ed. Yeah, George, your turn.
By definition, we cannot see the world differently, because if we did, we couldn't have a meeting of the minds. We couldn't have discussions. We couldn't collaborate. Right? It will be chaos and nothing in terms of humans. Now, the issues you bring up, Ron, there are two distinct questions that are brought up by your talk. One is the issue of quote unquote legitimate empiricism. And so the point I would make on that note is a tree, or is it a plant? Is a fish, or is it a reptile? And so that knowledge is always going to be subject to debate. It's always going to be contingent for reasons that are driven by empiricism, and also because of the scientific inquiry itself, in which actually we want knowledge to be contingent, to be in play, because that's how we deepen our understanding of empirical reality. In other words, if everything was just empirically static, it would not be worth studying. Now, in terms of empiricism, on this question of are you entitled to your opinion, what we're actually arguing and asking is that people engage empiricism in a full faith, honest way, which is to say that we can have a disagreement as to whether a fish is a fish or a reptile. And we can have that debate as long as both sides believe that both of them are approaching this in a sincere manner, right? So again, any quote unquote expert, any true expert recognizes the contingent ideas of knowledge, how something is always subject to revision, how we can always see things from different points of view, and how we can, in the process, hopefully deepen our understanding. Now, at some point, if you feel that the other person is not engaged in sincere inquiry, you're like, okay, I'm going to cut off the conversation because I don't believe you're really making an argument based in empiricism, etc., and so forth. Now, the other issue you raise is one of the political theory of knowledge, in pointing to things like vaccines, January 6th. And here we have to make a direct appeal to the anti-Enlightenment, and more specifically, Friedrich Nietzsche. Because the argument there is that the role of elites in society is to establish order. And you can even go back and make a reference to Plato's Noble Lie. And so what you see with Donald Trump, what you saw with Adolf Hitler, is the mobilization of hate, which is to say that we are going to organize society around hate of the other, some target group, whatever, so on and so forth. Trump, Hitler have no interest in the truth at all. In other words, if we brought Adolf Hitler here and said, look, Adolf, there really is no Aryan race, there's no Jewish cabal, he might even say to you, look, I know there's no such thing. It doesn't matter, but I find it politically useful. Just like January 6th, Trump knows that he lost the election, but he finds it politically useful to repeat this lie over and over again, to mobilize people in order to establish dictatorship. And so there, I mean, you bring up liberal thinkers like Rousseau, you cast, and so the problem with that mode of thought, the idea that, free speech, etc., and so forth, and there is a problem. The problem is that you are not confronting the reality that people will seek to destabilize the situation politically, that they will seek to overthrow the government using lies, mobilizing people on lies, including hate. So in this way, not to make any excuses for Stalin whatsoever, because the man was an arch criminal, and he actually destroyed the Russian Revolution in terms of its revolutionary solidarity principle. But it is also valid and true, and this is true also of China today. It is also valid and true that the United States was actively seeking to overthrow that regime. And the same thing with China. So the point of the matter is that you invoke, again, liberals like Kant, and you're really missing a key aspect of the argument and a key aspect of political understanding, which is that a la the anti-Enlightenment, people do use lies, they use hate to destabilize society, to bring about a political outcome they find desirable. And the question becomes, is it politically necessary to combat these lies and to even combat the people that are trying to propagate these lies? And that is a legitimate question. That is not an anti-free speech question. That is a question of combating criminality, combating people which are trying to basically destroy society and establish dictatorship, etc., and so forth. Thank you very much.
Thank you, George. Are those your opinions?
I'm not sure the question. I don't understand the question.
Everything you said, are they your opinions?
I believe they're rooted in fact.
Oh, yeah?
I believe that is a logical, reasonable inference from the facts.
Really?
Yes, that's my position.
You would think that's a position, that's an opinion, right?
Look, in the end,
No,
in the end,
I'm just asking, are they facts what you just said, or are they your opinions about what you think facts are? It's just a simple question. Because
there's
when
no
you,
bifurcation. There's no bifurcation.
well, when
There's
you
no bifurcation between fact and opinion.
really,
Yes.
okay.
Really.
So you reckon that the person who does things which your opinion are evil, that person doesn't really believe they're evil. He actually believes, he does not believe that they are evil, or he believes they're evil, but really he thinks they're not evil. So evil people are always wrong in the sense that they are not honest. You cannot have a really evil person because that person really knows he's wrong. That's your opinion?
I believe, this is my point to you. I believe that Hitler and Trump feel that they are right in what they are doing.
Okay, that's good.
They are not interested in legitimate empiricism. They see the ends as justifying whatever they have to do to get to that ends.
You think Hitler did not believe what he was doing 100%? That's your opinion. Based on what?
I'm not sure. I'm not. So, are you saying that he really believed there was an Aryan race? That he really believed
Are you saying
the propaganda?
Are you saying that he did not believe it? What's that based
I mean,
on?
I think that I guess this is the question that I would ask you, Ron. This is the question I would ask you. If he were here today, and you would say, "Look, we've done genetic studies. You know, there is no such thing as Aryan."
That's not the point.
What do you think he would say to that? What do you think he would say to that?
That's not the point. It doesn't matter what you tell him. He believed he was right, and there's nothing.
Exactly. That's
Okay.
exactly my point.
Okay, good. So you can't say that.
Well, he was right. He was right not in the empirical claim. He was not right empirically. He was right morally. So the moral ends justifies the mean. So in other words, when I say he thinks he's right in propagating this. He may be like, I don't care whether or not there's an Aryan race or not.
What is this based on? Your opinion about Hitler? What is it based on? I don't understand what you're saying. You really believe that you are right. This is the problem. You are 100% sure that your opinion is correct, established fact. And I keep on telling you it might not be. And you cannot admit that it might not be. You keep on throwing stuff out and saying, this is it.
What I'm saying to you is that, Ron, is that it is not a legitimate claim to hold that Hitler cared one way or another about whether the Aryan race was accurate or not. So to say that, oh, you don't know that, I'm like, I mean, again, it's not a legitimate position to hold. It's simply not something that is based in the empirical record.
Okay. Thank you very much, George. James.
Okie doke. Nice meeting you all, and nice meeting you again, Ron. And I wanted to say that there's a lot of things to say. There was a philosopher that you didn't mention, and some people might not be familiar with, but his name is Karl Jaspers, and German, and he falls under the title of existential in the way Kierkegaard and Nietzsche fall into that category. He wrote about all the different categories of existential life, but he also including things like life, and but he also talked about worldview, and basically he concluded that worldview is something that is different between every individual. Each individual develops a different worldview. So this is kind of like translated into somebody else's language might be, oh, you think everyone has a different opinion. Well, some different opinions. In other words, there's the worldview that extends across all humanity, that differentiates itself across every person. And I believe that it is subject to the satisfaction principle, that people want to be satisfied. They develop desires, and the desires that they develop are based on their levels of satisfaction in their life, right? And you mentioned all these philosophers that we honor, but they're all great thinkers, but they all disagree with each other in different ways. They're perfect examples of how just tremendous acuity and ability to express yourself can just result in a lot of different principles and a lot of different, even conflicting points of view: empirical, skeptical, existential, the classics, all that stuff. Just varies all across the line. You mentioned scientific thinking might be considered to be in, well, I forget what the word was, but it was approximate, right? So it could be considered to be approximate, but no, not approximate. It's just that that it's subject to being, in the words of Karl Popper, it's subject to being nullified. In other words, anyone's scientific opinion or anyone's scientific fact is always subject to either being replaced with a different theory or nullified. And the scientists, in my opinion, the scientists that used mathematics the most, and this would include people like Newton, Boyle, Einstein, these people who were capable of subjecting their scientific research to rigorous mathematics are kind of like perennials. Their science tends to last the longest, and it's the most consistent. And so the facts of science, it's not that they're approximate, it's just that the facts are developed over time, and the ones that become established over a long period of time are usually the ones that are backed up with a strong mathematical acuity or even mathematical invention by their creators. Especially in the case of Newton, that was true. He was actually inventing his math as he went along, developing his theories. So this idea that science is kind of like a different cut above everything else, no, it just has a better methodology. It has a methodology where it can be criticized, knocked down, and subject and be subjected to nullification. That's the words of Karl Popper. So that's the difference with scientific fact. All the other facts are the same. The other facts, we hold them as really important to us, and we want our facts to prevail. Maybe we have a political attitude, but whether or not facts are going to be cogent politically is always subject to people's satisfaction. In other words, if I am going to agree with someone else, like I agree with Michael, I loved what Michael had to say, and I'm really grateful for his willingness to knock off his scientific hat and just talk about the meanings and feelings of people involved in discourse. So this is really, really important, that when we're in discourse, we have levels of satisfaction. And when our satisfaction is very low, we're going to be very uncomfortable. And so that's why it's really important for us to discuss all of these things that we might have differences about. And there's none of us that is completely right about any of them. So we have to realize that every individual person has to be satisfied inside their worldview with how they're being approached. We have to have respect for others. We have to have respect for the points of view of others up to a certain point. I mean, there may be times when you just want to walk away, when you're not satisfied. That's okay. If you're not satisfied, walk away from a conversation. I'm not saying it's good to hurl an insult, but that people are not going to tolerate being dissatisfied. And that's a lot of people. That's not just the smart ones. They're not going to tolerate being satisfied for very long. They're going to, if you want to lower their status or make any kind of treat them in a kind of derogatory manner, they're going to be dissatisfied, and they're going to change their attitude towards you and what you represent. So I just wanted to throw that in. It is not a free play of ideas here. This is subject to the different worldview of every individual in the world.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that's very interesting. Satisfaction is as the Rolling Stones said, yes. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thank you very much. I especially, I was sorry that Michael did not go for the challenge that I threw in, because I especially talked about science, not a lot of science not being accurate, and I wanted somebody to challenge me and show me how it is accurate, etc. I'm still waiting, because the stuff that I've been doing on it I've been finding it to be very, very strange, especially maths, which is they consider it to be the most accurate thing possible. But I, though not a mathematician, disagree in that sometimes maths is just there for the sake of maths, and it doesn't apply to anything worthwhile sometimes. So, but anyway, thank you very much. That was very interesting, James.
Thank you, Ron.
Very nice. Claudio, haven't seen you for ages. How are you?
Oh, I'm fine. Yeah, we saw each other 2 months ago, I believe.
Yes, at
Or
least.
yeah, I couldn't attend the other meetings because I play competitive ball hockey, and the time conflict.
Terrible.
Yeah, you already know
Change.
that.
Have to
Yeah.
change the meetings.
No, you don't have to. Anyway, yeah. Anyway, the following is my opinion, by the way. So, facts may be opinions as well. Okay, I'm not disagreeing with you. Even scientific facts or theories, whatever. But these opinions, according to my opinion, are better than opinions that lack evidence or that lack a wide acceptance of scientists and philosophers. For example, an opinion held by one, or a few individuals, especially lay people, versus an opinion that is held by many scientists and philosophers. I would put more credence on the latter. But is that the case for most people? I doubt it. And a good example is when Trump was running for president, and after he became president, especially on Twitter. You know what happened on Twitter? Millions of Americans are accepting the opinion of an individual, the president, regardless of how ludicrous it was, versus opinions that were accepted empirically by scientists, the scientific, and most people, and the majority of people in the media, and that can be dangerous. Yes, we are entitled to our opinions, but how we express those opinions and where do matter. Again, that's my opinion. No, I don't believe that all opinions should, deserve an open forum like on Zoom or Twitter, Facebook, radio, TV, and even on the streets. Especially those harmful ones, like the dangerous ones, like George alluded to earlier. For example, Hitler preached on his dangerous opinions and beliefs on the streets before he became the leader of Germany. And not only did the Weimar Republic, a democratic government, fail 6 million Jews by not silencing Hitler permanently, removing his democratic entitlements to free speech, but they also failed nations that were conquered by the Nazis. More than 50 million people died, right? Now imagine what would have happened, all the suffering that would have been avoided had he been stopped. His opinions would have been stifled permanently, right? And finally, why are some people surprised that social media is very toxic, that people become become depressed, a lot of people become depressed, become anxious, and even commit suicide while engaging in social media regularly? I think it's mainly because it has become the wild, wild west of offensive and dangerous opinions, and comments and replies. Hundreds of thousands of people aggressively demonizing each other's beliefs and opinions on social media. Yeah, we are entitled to disagree and reject other people's opinions and beliefs, but the people in charge of social media platforms are too weak, or they're not aggressive enough in promoting politeness and respect when disagreeing with others, and blocking or kicking out people who promote dangerous opinions, and blocking or kicking out people who use foul language, promote violence, or promote serious lies about others and other groups of innocent people. And that fight, Trump again. The fight that finally happened to Trump when Twitter finally realized how dangerous his opinions were to Americans. They finally did it, but they took too long. I'm not saying it's an easy thing to do, but it is doable. And an honest effort is required to manage opinions more aggressively in order for people to live more peacefully and to become, decent human beings. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. Thank you. Very good. Terry.
I had to find the unmute button there. I guess I'll do a few miscellaneous items for folks who heard him mention that I have some AI background. I helped in the funding of some of the AI development. Jan LeCun used to be one of the people who worked in the projects. In fact, I supported him at a time when, believe it or not, this whole thing that's going on now was considered, probably wouldn't work, and people were actively advertising that Jan's ideas didn't work in the hallways, which is hilarious considering how much is being done now with Jan's ideas. So he really did help develop that field. He's the chief scientist for Meta. It's now Facebook. So nice guy, but it's very strange to see someone that you knew as a lab person become a prominent person getting national awards and everything. So it's kind of amusing. But at any rate, from that viewpoint, I want to give that a preface, because whenever you hear this as AI, this is not AI. This is massive reuse of existing information. A better way to think of it is the most efficient reusability engine ever created. You can find anything anywhere around the world and reuse it very quickly. Don't let them convince you it's intelligent. It's not. It is. Jan LeCun himself the other day said it's about as smart as a cat. I disagreed with him. I said, well, I like the fact he said that, but it's smarter, it's dumber than a stump. It's not even as smart as a cat, and it isn't. It just can fool you. You can pull this stuff up so quickly that it makes it look smart. But the instant you give this quote AI a problem that has never been solved by any human, it just all falls flat on its face, because it's not thinking. It's not intelligent. It is simply reusing what's already there. And I can do it in very impressive ways with very good language, extremely convincing. But this has been a point of advocacy I've been saying. I think Vaughn can testify to this, that very early on, I keep saying this is not AI. This is extremely effective reuse. And if you use it that way, it's very valuable. If you say, I am a human, I have intelligence, this thing doesn't, but boy, it can get my information for me fast. That's good. If you say, oh, this thing's smarter than I am, I'm going to let it run my business for me, you're in trouble, because all it's going to do is borrow whatever other businesses are doing, and you all wind up doing the same thing. You certainly won't do anything truly creative, because all you're doing is just getting other people's stuff. So be careful in this thing. This is not I know people. I normally am one of the people working on true AI. And that alone, I can tell you, they're not the same thing. You want the key characteristic of true AI? It works at about 10 watts or so of power. That's your brain. To imitate that, we have data centers here in Ashburn, where I live, that take up megawatts of power, just to give kind of an imitation that makes you fool you into thinking that it's smart. That tells you something's horribly wrong with the physics. We don't understand how this form of intelligence works. We literally do not understand it. And I say that as an opinion from people in neurology. I remember one guy was telling me, he said, yeah, all this time we still don't understand how memory works. That's remarkable. We don't even understand how memory works in neurons. So this is a neurologist talking about this. So that's my main thing is I get on that. Science, you know, I think we have to use the foundation of science. I think is the only way out of some aspects of this. That and treating people like they're valuable. In fact, put that one first. It's such a simple principle. If you treat other people as they have value, a lot of this just kind of goes out the window as a problem. But of course, the problem is breeding hatred and doing other things is also an easy way to get power. And some people could care less about others. But nonetheless, the principle of simply respecting others is important. Science is not perfect. You have this thing called sunk cost. And one of the things that happened after the phenomenal work in the 70s, where they figured out the standard model, which is incredibly valuable physics, really good science, rock solid, good science. They had this huge community had nothing to do. They literally wrapped everything up. To this day, the last thing he did was the so-called the God particle. And all of that was the last remnant of what they did in the 70s. They have no new predictions. They have no new explanations. They have no new insights into the other mysteries we've found since then. And it left people with nothing to do. So they glommed onto something called superstring theory. It's not string theory. String theory is a real thing. That's from the 60s. But they glommed onto this, universities invested time, resources, thousands of papers, entire departments. So think about this. What happens when someone comes out with a proof and says, oh, by the way, that doesn't work, which happened in 2020 when they showed that the strings are 2,000 times too big and clunky to explain known, very well documented studies about gamma rays. So what do? You ignore it. And this is a situation we've been in for like 50 years now. You get this huge community that's built around non-provable, non-evidence-based, non-verifiable, or they thought, mathematical stuff, and they took it kind of like a free cookie. Just go out and do whatever you want to, and tell people how smart you are, like Sheldon in Big Bang Theory, which is actually very much a good example of what I'm talking about. He would never have gotten a Nobel Prize for that in real life because there's no verifiable experiment you can do to prove his supersymmetry idea. That's actually one of the ideas that's been disproven. So this is what a large chunk of funding has gotten into, and it's a bad cycle. Meanwhile, you've got people doing very real things, solid state, condensed matter, electromagnetics, doing fantastic work, excellent results, and make a difference. Devices we're using are part of those. So it's not like all science went down this rabbit hole, but certain areas go very far south in a hurry. One comment in Hitler did advocate the big lie. So when George was saying that, I was, Ron, I have to admit, I was kind of going with George. I'm saying like, yeah, this guy didn't believe any of this crap. He just, you know, it was convenient to him politically. There's some very vicious people in this world. They don't care whether it's true or not. They care less. It's just whatever works. So Hitler being one of those, that's no surprise. There's plenty of examples of them going around. People say, hey, I just want to, you know, I want to get something for myself and I don't care who I hurt. If you don't care about other people, you can do a lot of things. Ron, last comment. Math, Ron, I keep meaning to talk to you again. I just put out a comment the other day looking at pure mathematics in terms of isolation of the information aspects of the mathematics, that even an equation 1 + 1 = 2, if you truly strip it of all references to apples and other things and have pure math, you wind up in the same situation you do with quantum mechanics. You can't distinguish your parts anymore. And that's fascinating. And Ron, you were the one, I mentioned your name when we did a post about that. But there's something very squirrely happens when you get too strict about saying, you know, math is absolutely pure. Well, you can do that, but then you put yourself into a domain where all of a sudden the math may not be quite as real or quite as simple as you thought it was. I think there's some fascinating exploration available in that. And that's my opinion and everything, and I shall shut up now.
Thank you very much, Terry. Thank you. Bill, at last.
Yes, thank you. You know, I was thinking about my opinions and what their source is. And my sense is that my opinions are shaped reinforced and corrected and punished by the systems that I occupy that intersect one another. And there's no one system in play, but multiple systems are correcting me all the time. And my illness recently has made me convinced of that truth. But I also have some strength in the idea that there are ways of checking the truth of our opinions. And professionally, it's been litigation. And by reading, it's in falsification. Those are two truth techniques that accomplish one important thing that we need to remember in this conversation, that the narrowing of the context, the brick in Wittgenstein's example that he calls for, the issue of the sun moving around the moon in the example that proved Einstein's theory and showed it was not false, and the litigation and the narrowing of interest that focuses on evidence and a consensus opinion of juries that are convinced by a burden of proof. The narrowing of interest and the narrowing of context is the opening of truth, it seems to me, practically speaking, because truth is something we need to rely on to move ahead, to solve our conflicts. And if we can do that by narrowing the context instead of living out here in this broad context of distillations, of metaphysical points, of implementations of systems, we're going to lose it. But if we want to narrow it down to a system that is a careful analysis of context, I think we can understand how we are able to survive. Thanks.
Thank you. You never. I thought you would go for what I said in the beginning, that that to be entitled is a purely legal matter, not an intrinsic worth of people. That was my. I thought you'd go for that.
I did. Didn't I?
Okay.
My sense of it is I'm entitled to the opinion I can prove.
Okay.
I'm not entitled to anything inherently.
Prove, but
in the narrow context, truth, technology applied, outcome.
And it basically, what is entitled is legal, isn't it? Or am I wrong?
No, it's a question of adjudication based on evidence. And I think falsification is adjudicative. And I think that litigation is adjudicative. And I think both bring us into closer touch with minor truths. And minor truths are what we're talking about here, isn't it?
Yeah.
We can be confident about minor truths. Did Smith pull the trigger? Did Einstein's test of relativity work when the example of the moon and the sun were applied? So it's a question of applying rules in a careful, managed context, not the willy-nilly bullshit that we get in talking to one another, maybe in this context and other contexts, but it's really too broad to bring truth to the focus. But it has to be narrow context to make sense of things in the real way that it can make them susceptible to a truth technology like a litigation or falsification.
Okay. Thank you very much, Bill. Thank you. Thank you. Frank, at last. Thank you for your patience. It's been a long wait. Frank can't hear you.
Yeah, sorry. There's still people behind me, so I'll try to keep it to the 5 minutes or so.
Thank you.
So, I struggle with relativism versus universalism and opinions versus facts. I kind of lean towards, questioning what, are there such things as facts? Or, are we confined to the world of opinion? I would think that the evolutionary biologists would, support my view that we're all primarily opinion-based in the sense that, we've gotten to this point by having some certain built-in responses to stimuli in our environment, that we make sense out of it from an approach, appeal, or a fear, response as an innate reaction to a stimuli around us. It's almost like having an opinion about the environment, that squiggly line over there could be a snake. I have to get away from it. No matter what it is, I have an innate reaction to that. Now, why do people talk about facts? I think when people talk about facts, they talk, I think that they're kind of meaning that there's that they kind of think intuitively that there's a yardstick of what's true and what's not true. And the facts are things that are opinions that are more true than not true. And, when you think about truth, I think that there's three, primary, views of truth, correspondence, coherence, and utility. Does does my opinion correspond with the outside world in some way? Does my opinion have coherence with other people's opinion? And does my opinion have utility? Is it useful? So I think that, when you get opinions, I think we're all kind of driven to have opinions about the world. If we have another person who agrees with us, we tend to elevate that opinion towards the fact area, right? We kind of think that we have confidence in this because it has coherence. My view of my opinion lines up with yours, and we have coherence. So that's some evidence about my opinion being fact. Am I entitled to that? I don't think there's any choice. I think we're I'm biologically predisposed to have opinions. So yes, we're entitled to have these opinions because we don't have any choice. I think that was a point that I thought you kind of made up earlier, that you brought up earlier. I think it's biological. So, the facts are, are the opinions true to become facts? Somebody mentioned today is Sunday. Is that a fact? Well, it's a fact only because there's coherence. A lot of people got together and said, let's, break up time into certain increments, and let's say that it's every 7 days we have a repeating cycle, and we'll name one of those days Sunday, and today is that day in the cycle. So yes, it's a fact that we call today Sunday because we've agreed to call today Sunday. Does the earth revolve around the sun, or does the sun revolve around the earth? Well, there's a guy who said that they're equivalent, right? That in fact, the entire universe is dynamic. Every point is in motion in relation to every other point, and that the Earth circling around the sun is a fact only because of the sense that the math is easier. That guy is Stephen Hawking, by the way. So, he's kind of has a little bit of credibility in this area, but that it's just as equally valid to say that, the sun goes around the Earth, because in fact it does. Just that the math is easier for calculating certain things within the solar system if we take the perspective, the relative point of view of the sun being the center of our immediate, universe, and that we can identify the positions of things easier with the math involved. So how do how do truths become? I'm a little bit over time here. I did want to get into Thomas Kuhn's structure of scientific revolutions, because I think that is a good paradigm. I mean, his notion of paradigm shift is a good description of about how groups of people come up with ideas that they agree with. Other groups of people come up with different ideas, and you have this competition to see which set of ideas are more useful. You think of phlogiston as the theory of fire versus oxygen. He's got a beautiful description about how groups of people were convinced about phlogiston until they were outcompeted in terms of utility by those who believed in oxygen. Talking about Trump and Hitler, you cut off the head, so what? 40, 50 million people voted for Trump. I mean, will there become a new head? You cut off the Hitler, that head. How many people did it take to support his regime? This is the competition of groups of people who have a shared idea. Over time, we saw that there were other groups who outcompeted those folks who believed in the Hitlerian superiority of the Aryan race, right? That was a large group of people, not trivial. This is not one person. There's a large group of people who are basically outcompeted by other groups who talked about, different value structures. And what will happen with the Trump, that remains to be seen. There's no teleology here. It will either, his 50 million people may outvote, other folks, and that may be the predominant methodology going forward until something else outcompetes that. So anyway, that's my thought. I wanted to get cultural evolution. That's a big theme of mine. I wanted to make sure we talk about that at some point. So I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Frank. Thank you very much. Very interesting. Could I ask the people who've not got their videos on to please put them on? It's so much nicer and more social. Is that a no? It's gone very silent. Maggie, you'd like to put your video on? Oh, hi there, Maggie. Now we can see people a bit. Okay, Trevor, I know. Okay, yes, thank you very much, Frank. Very interesting. Michael, your turn again.
Yeah, so many interesting points were brought up. So I did not take a bite, Ron, about discussing this objectivity of science for the sake of time, because I just felt that it would take too much time. But briefly, your example of string theory that experts express not the opinions but the facts, it's kind of funny, because string theory is very sort of on facts. So there are so many different variants of string theory, and the choice of a particular variant, as I understand it, maybe someone corrects me if I am wrong, it's just a matter of opinions. It's personal taste. And despite the fact, sorry about this, using this word, that string theory as a whole is competing, say, with loop quantum gravity and some other alternatives. And again, until it's proven otherwise, each of these theory remains an opinion. It can be an expert opinion, but it's still an opinion. So that's the fact. Now, another interesting point that Terry made about AI. I agree that what now goes for AI is not really an intelligence. It's kind of specialized and limited. But what I worry about is what is usually called artificial general intelligence, that can be given an agency, or can have the capabilities to develop these agency to take their own decisions and its own actions. And it does not need to use as much power as our brains. It can use the whole power available. That's secondary consideration. But what matters is that if it can take the agency, we don't know what happens. So that's my worry. Now another issue about entitlement. So I have a problem with this whole notion of entitlement. Are you entitled to your opinions? If maybe, it depends. If your opinion means this three criteria that James just reminded us, then maybe. But there is something else. There are additional criteria. Do you also assume that I'm entitled on my opinion if they are different? If you don't, probably I should not assume that you are entitled for your opinions. But there is something even more important. Does your opinion or even just expressing your opinion, can it harm others? And this is related to this comments made about Trump, about Hitler. So these are just the words, right? So I did not tell them like kill other people. But probably you have to be responsible for your words. And in our liberal political system, of course, the freedom of speech, it's a big thing. Sometimes it's considered as something absolute. But maybe it's still not more important than harm that can be caused to other people. So that's a tricky balancing act, how to prevent this harm from expressing your opinions that someone feel that they entitled for, preventing this from harming other people. But at the same time, allowing people to express their opinions, because this is also vitally important. So that's a very difficult question. And also, I promised to share with you briefly some my personal experience of like reconciling the different opinions. So I'm involved in an organization called Braver Angels. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Which, among other things, it arranges this what they call one-to-one conversations between people who take the opposite positions on some controversial issues. And I participated in such conversation with someone, a lady from Michigan, who was like on the issue of the war in Gaza. She identified her position as pro-Palestinian, and I, for the sake of this conversation, identified myself as pro-Israel. And it was interesting to me if we could agree on anything, because this is such a contentious issue. And Ron, I don't know how much you know that it is a contentious issue in the United States, which is really divisive. And they recommended us to have one or two conversations. We actually had three, and maybe we'll have one more. And we had been able to generate our points of agreement, which is a pretty extensive list. If you want, I can share it with you. And we both felt like very satisfied that we could find so much common ground on this. although we still had our disagreements, but well, our positions at the end were different but compatible in the sense that I described. And then we thought what we could do next after we found so much common ground on this. And one idea was that maybe we could create a joint letter to send our decision makers based on our points of agreement, but we did not have enough time to work on this letter. So what we decided that maybe I will send a letter from myself to my members of Congress, asking for certain actions to resolve humanitarian situation in Gaza, to support Israel and deny Hamas from this war, from this victory in the war of propaganda by turning public opinion against Israel, and so on. But before sending my letter, I would share this letter with her and ask whether she agreed with this letter. And only after that, I would send it. So it's a kind of peer-reviewed politics. So it's the same approach as we are using in science or in engineering. And that's what we did. And when she gave me her okay, I sent my letter practically expressing our common position that probably was less extreme, more balanced, more maybe less polarizing, and having a better choice to be enacted, to have maybe some political consequences. And that's one example of the approach that I'm waiting for. So if people disagree, they should not just shout out and try to like push our opinions as extreme as they are. Maybe they have first to try to agree on something, like what scientists are doing in their research. There is also always this peer review process, right? Before you get published. So maybe it would result in better political decisions and in better climate overall. So just a thought for you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Thank you. Anton, you've been very patient.
Yeah, I've made it.
Yeah.
So I think I can, there's one thing that I realized, or at least one thing that I realized during this conversation, and it builds on something that I said last. I mean, obviously we've been talking about truth and what's true or what's real. But one thing that I noticed, that things that we claim to be objective and things that are opinion both have in common is that both objectivity as well as opinions can have certain concrete, steadfast views as well as more nuanced views. But of course, the difference that we typically see is that if something is objective, then it's seen as valid, and an opinion is seen as not correct or incorrect, which in and of itself is fine. I don't have a problem with that, especially for the sake of conversation. It's just would be an important distinction between what is objective, or as far as we know is objective, and what's an opinion. So that's the difference I see there. However, although I think a lot of things are subjective, that doesn't mean I think everything is necessarily subjective, or that doesn't mean nothing is verifiable. Just because we might not be able to verify everything. So those are a couple of things that I will throw out there. I'll just keep it brief.
Thank you very much, Anton. You did keep it brief, and I really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Gary.
Okay, I will try to keep this brief as well. So I think, ultimately there's a pragmatic question here is, do we want ideas by the many or ideas by the few? Right. That's first off. Then this idea of dangerous ideas I find very concerning, because then you come to the question of who curates these ideas, when, why, and how. I think there's a real risk that I see from some people who are willing to embrace totalitarianism out of fear of totalitarianism. I really think we need to be mindful about becoming what we're supposedly fighting against.
Very good point. Very good point. Thank you. George.
There are, I guess, three broad points I'd like to make. One is on this issue of truth and fact. And someone mentioned the Gaza genocide, so I feel free to bring that up, as someone brought up before. And that is that empirically, we know that bombs are being dropped on women and children, etc., in Gaza. The question is, that seemingly divides, is this to eliminate the Gazan population, or is this about Hamas? Now, what I'm going to say is, and this goes back to another point that I want to make, Ron, because you asked me about Hitler's state of mind, in which you seem to imply that my idea that Hitler knew the Aryan race was a con, you seem to suggest that that is not a fact, that perhaps Hitler did believe it. And again, what I'm going to say is the same thing. And this is really, I'm using these examples simply to point out this bifurcation between truth and fact. Okay. I don't want to, I understand these issues are controversial, but so be it. Which is to say that I would submit that it's unreasonable to think that Hitler was motivated by the truth, and that he was quite indifferent to the truth, and that unless you're going to argue he's insane, there is no validity to the idea of Aryan race. There is no validity behind Jewish cabal, and to believe those things is by definition to be outside of rationality. And we're going to assume that Hitler was not outside of rationality, because if he's outside of rationality, he couldn't function as an individual. And so the point is, of course, is that the truth is more important than empirical fact. And so that is what informs these debates. It is precisely because truth and fact are so intertwined and they're non-falsifiable, that's, I would submit, in the broad scope of things, that's trivial knowledge, but the truth and fact are so intertwined that, again, they really cannot be separated. And so, again, the most we can hope for, and the ideal is that whoever is engaging in a conversation, who's ever making a truth statement, is doing so sincerely, And I'm going to say that Hitler was not engaging in quote unquote truth statements sincerely, just like Trump does not engage them sincerely. Now, the other point I want to make, and Carrie brought this up, which is the idea of who's going to curate the truth. And I think that there is certainly, we see the truth curated by the major media. We see it curated in Twitter. And so the modern means of communication, because this is really what we're talking about, in many ways, we're talking about, anti-vaccine, this and that. We're talking about, and indeed, I'll say that the Nazi Party is the first modern political party precisely because it put the modern means of communication at the center of its political objectives. So the Nazis sought to make sure that everybody in Germany had a radio inside their home so they could hear the political line being articulated by the Nazi government. And so, the idea that, and again, this, I guess, is a true statement, this comes down to intent, right? In Trump, in arguing that January 6th, right, the election was stolen, or now his new line is that there's a stealth army being brought up into the United States through illegal immigration, right? And what we have to acknowledge, and I think what Carrie's point overlooks, is that there are people that are trying to stir up violence right? They want to animate the Proud Boys. They want to animate the 3%ers. They want more Dylan Roofs, if I got his name correct, who carried out a massacre in a church in, I believe, South Carolina. They want more Buffalo massacres or more massacres. I think it was El Paso, right? They want to stoke up this violence. They want to spew hate, lies. They want to mobilize hate. And so this becomes a real issue. In other words, it is simplistic and false to simply reduce this to a free speech question, right? Because that's not really what's at stake here, right? I would submit to you, indeed, that free speech in the Enlightenment sense is about the intent of the interlocutors, right? Are the interlocutors really seeking to forward human knowledge, deepen our understanding? And that's what free speech is. The dissemination of hate is anti-enlightenment. It's about blocking reason. It's about trying to stop the elevation of humanity. And I submit that again, people that are full faith and sincere can easily determine what is anti-enlightenment. Again, seeking to stop the elevation of humanity, socially, politically, seeking to stop human knowledge. We can differentiate those between the anti-enlightenment and those that are true enlightenment interlocutors, right? Again, disagreement is central to our understanding of reality. Everything is contingent, open to debate, open to discussion. If you approach the question sincerely, in full faith, if you are part of the Enlightenment Project, if you are outside the Enlightenment Project, and they're very easy to identify, right? Society has the right, indeed has the obligation to say, okay, you are not going to have access to the modern means of communication. That is a legitimate, reasonable Enlightenment point of view. And again, I want to go back to this question of Ron. What was your question? What was the issue in your mind concerning Hitler's intent and knowledge and ideas surrounding the Aryan race, et cetera, and so forth?
Thank you, George. Roland, you're in the
Hi.
dark.
I am a bit in the dark, yeah.
Okay. So are we all at the moment.
Yes, I'm speaking from the shadow side.
Yes.
Okay. So, oh God. Well, I suppose what the word that's been floating through my head throughout this discussion has been the word influence. Because I'm thinking to myself, who gives a damn about what opinions people have? Well, of course, everyone does. When you hear an opinion, it has an influence. And why do we express opinions? Well, presumably because we want to create an influence of some kind. Many of the things that people have been saying so far in this meeting have had, I think, as a background to what they're saying, the very idea of, do we want that opinion to have an influence or not? So I feel that this question about influence is absolutely central to the idea of opinions. And it strongly connects also with another point, I think Kelly made it, which was, sorry, Kerry, which was the question, can we help having opinions? If we can't help having opinions, then when we hear expressions of opinion from other people, we will be influenced by them in some way or other. So the next sort of level I was thinking about was what does that matter? Now, George has been very strong on the, what did he say? The elevation of humanity. I have no idea what that is. And I have no idea who is going to determine what the elevation of humanity means. And it strikes me as some sort of idealistic notion that, I don't know, is that a religion? Is it the same as a religion? It sounds like it to me. Is that the way that society, well, that evolution works? Does it work on the basis of some concept of evolution of species? I don't think so. To my mind, if I look around the world and see how opinions work, They work on the basis of influence, and quite a lot of opinions that I hear are absolute rubbish, and yet they still have influence on people. Trump has obviously been brought up as an example, Hitler, but those are just like extreme examples of things going on all the time. What about marketing? I mean, I remember, this is a trivial little story, but I remember years ago, my eye catching in the supermarket sight of a packet of Nestle's Shreddies. And the reason that it caught my attention was because emblazoned on the front of this packet was the claim that Nestle's Shreddies improved your child's concentration. And so I picked up this packet and studied the text on the back. And there's a graph on the back, and it had 3 different breakfasts. And the top one, which was a red line, was Nestle's Shreddies. And then underneath that were two other lines for alternative breakfasts. And this was a graph of your children's attention over time. And of course, the Nestle's Shreddies one was, going up and up, and the other 2 ones were like, whatever. Scientifically proven to blah, 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 blah. So I started reading the very small print, which was written in a sort of pale blue font on a darkish blue background. It's quite hard to read in sort of 5-point text. And it turns out that these 2 breakfasts, which were the alternatives being compared, one of them was pure glucose. That was the one, control breakfast against which this was being compared. And the other one, even more amazingly, was no breakfast at all. So these were the 2 controls against which this claim was being made. Now, okay, can we call this an opinion? Well, it is an opinion, isn't it? It's an opinion being blazoned in front of people. And if you don't read the small print, you go ahead and take it. This isn't that isn't a sort of unusual ploy, though. This similar ploys are adopted in the process of marketing. Every day we go into the shop and we get bombarded with opinions that have been carefully constructed by people, carefully leaving out the things that they don't want us to know about and adding in the things that they do want us to be influenced by. So lying, deceiving, cheating, this is just normal. It's normal in human beings. It's normal in nature. Animals deceive other animals by their camouflaging. So this idea that that somehow or other there is some, I don't know, some higher principle of a higher third reference that we can refer to, an objectified reference that we can refer to and say, oh yes, that opinion's valid and this opinion isn't valid. I think that's just nonsense, because the only way in which you can evaluate an opinion is by having some kind of reference that is agreed upon. Now, it may well be that intelligent people around the world will say, well, we should agree on references that are constructed on the basis of good quality evidence. It's a perfectly feasible argument. Is it the most effective way? I don't know. A lot of people seem to succeed very well with lying, cheating, and deceiving. So, I don't know where that all fits in the future of humanity and in the concept of evolution generally. But I cannot see that this idea of objectifying a reference and trying to externalize it and divorce it from the concept of influence is I don't see that has any support at all. I can't see why that would work. I would also say, I think people who are very, very good at reasoning are very inclined to assume that that is a very good reference. And I think they're wrong. I mean, I'm not opposing reasoning as a strategy for developing one's own beliefs and one's own theories, but I don't think that other people think like that. Or rather, I don't think that everyone thinks like that. I don't think people are convinced by reasoning, or rather, possibly, I think a small number, a certain number of people who have strong affinity towards reasoning may well be convinced by it. But a lot of people aren't, because they're not really interested. They're not interested in the future of humanity. They're interested in how they can pay their mortgage during the next month, or there are different things going on for people than these sort of idealistic goals. So behind that, I suppose, was my next question, which also touched on something that Kerry said, is who is the adjudicator? Who is the person or persons or whatever who is going to say, well, that opinion is a bad opinion? Because basically there has to be a reference in that case to some kind of external, whatever that means, adjudication. And I don't know where that comes from, apart from another opinion. So I think I'll stop there. Thanks.
Absolutely right. No, very good points. Your supermarket experiences are pretty wild.
I've had a lot more than that, I can tell you, in terms of encountering lying and deception. It's
I believe you. Thank
it's
you,
a very successful strategy for people. Yeah.
I know. Thank you, Roland. Christina.
Hi, everybody.
Hi there, Christina.
Yeah, sorry, I'm lost. I have to admit I am shy, and also I'm not used to talk. I guess it's since I was a child, my father didn't talk to me or didn't see me as equal. So I don't know. I have this tendency to blame him a lot, even if he's dead now. Well, I wanted to reply to somebody who said that science is the new religion. And again, I will bring my own example to tell you that 15 years ago, I was diagnosed with cancer, and my opinion was that science is not helpful. So I tried to cure myself, going through different methods, and I looked a lot, and the opinions were extremely polarized. And every time I found the proof for something, I realized that there is a proof or an evidence for the opposite. So anyway, I refused all treatments, and it got me to 2 years ago when the cancer was in all the body, and I had no choice but to go with science. And now I managed to survive because there are this, I forgot the name of these monoclonal antibodies that are very good. They are killing tumors, and I'm still alive and I can function. So yeah, science is my new religion in a way. And even though I didn't want to go for it, I had no choice because it was the only way to stay alive. So yeah, this is the idea, to find the truth, to every time, like somebody mentioned in the notes that some scientists in the past went against the mainstream thinking, and this is the idea, when you find something very polarized, to try to decompose it in the other way, like love. People talk about love or marriage, and you can go and see, maybe deconstruct these notions and see what is love. Is to have your needs met? Is it a transaction? Anyway, I just to say that, all this positivity thinking now, that everybody thinks that you should go and be positive. Why not go and see the negative? you know, the fact that people don't know themselves and they don't see their shadows, it is known in psychology that they project that in the exterior. You know, you see everybody else bad just because you don't see that you could be bad too, and you are actually. So yeah. Also this idea that instead of seeing opposition everywhere, to see the complementarity of things. You know, Ken Wilber went to construct this model, AQUAL, all levels, or anyway, I forgot his name. But yeah, to see that theories complement each other, because we construct models, but we cannot put everything in a model. So we need different models and different opinions. The more you ask for opinions, and you receive them, the more you see the mandala forming, and maybe you get a more bigger picture. Like you have opinions when you start living, even you don't realize that there are opinions. You know, there is this model, Uri Bronfenbrenner's ecological framework for human development. Well, social ecological models that say that you grow in a family, in a school, in a social environment, and you're influenced by everything around you. So you have opinions without even realizing you have them. So yeah, you go back and you start trying to know yourself. And this idea of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, you know, you go in the two polarized opposite directions, and then you see that there is a synthesis going from that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very
and
much.
And I like
Christina.
to listen to all of you. Yeah.
And we like to listen to you, Christina. Thank you very much. Thank you. You've got no reason to be shy. You really do not. Thank you very much. Thank you. Michael.
Christina, I'm very glad to hear that you found a way and strengths to beat your cancer, and please take care and keep going. And I appreciate what you said. Now it's such a stimulating discussion that I raised my hand a third time that I don't usually do, but anyway, a few more points. So is sun revolving around Earth, or Earth is revolving around sun? So the simplest model is that they both are revolving around the common center of gravity. That just turns out to be within a sun, but and very close to the center of sun. But anyway, but in our Earth frame of reference, sun is revolving around Earth. So it's just a little illustration how seemingly contradictory ideas could both be valid. And on Ronald's point, or was it Ronald's point about the influence that when we are expressing our opinions, we are influencing other people. So sometimes we are, but if I expressed my opinion with a goal to influence other people, probably I would be disappointed 9 times out of 10, because people rarely change their minds just because they hear the different opinions. And by the way, I have no problem with being influenced by other people's opinions, especially if these opinions are really good and wise. What's wrong about being influenced by them? And I'm also having no problem with not having my opinion. If I just don't have enough evidence, maybe it's okay to say that I don't know. And it's very important, Kerry's point about sometimes in response to totalitarian ideas, we can embrace totalitarian ideas. And who could be a judge to decide which ideas are correct? And that's a really big issue. And the issue, so what is the reference? How can we decide who is right? And the issue does not have a simple answer, unfortunately, because in practice, only we all together can decide on this reference. Through our discussion and through our actions and through learning and constant adjustments in our opinions, until we find some ways to basically to get along with each other. And there are some great discoveries made through this process. One of them was this idea of empirical evidence. So if we both agree to accept the results of our observations or measurements, then we all agree that this is probably the truth, quote unquote. And another great idea is of this peer reviews and procedures that you are required to go through before you get acceptance of your results in science and engineering. But my underlying model of this, so my professional experience is in numerical simulations, and there is this idea of iterative solutions to the problem, which converge to some actual solution after many iterations. So, and you can start from different initial states, and you still would converge to the same solution. And sometimes it takes just little tweaks in your parameters of your model to get the procedure that would converge, and otherwise it would not converge. It would oscillate or it would diverge or whatever. So this is, to me, a model how we as a society can converge to this common reference. Just through these multiple interactions and struggling with different ideas and trying to find something that we all could agree, and rejecting some ideas that don't work until finally we find something that works for maybe not for everyone, but for most people. And through democratic procedures, that would become the state that would be able to keep in bay the violent minority that otherwise could destroy the whole social fabric. And unfortunately, probably there is no shortcut for this process. And the real choice is between this painful and slow public discourse through democratic procedures and between the war. That's the choice that we have. We have to make this public discourse work. That should be our goal. And although maybe I could sound like proselytizing on behalf of Braver Angels, but there are many other organizations that are exploring different ways to find these agreements in civil and peaceful ways. And to me, this is the way to go. We have to support all these efforts. Unless we are already at war, so when you're already at war, you have no choice. You have to fight. But The question is how to prevent this situation from happening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Thank you. George.
I want to respond to Roland's comments. And first and foremost, I want to stress the idea that it is historically, demonstratively false that people are indifferent to the world around them. We have the American Revolution, the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution, the American Civil War, where people amassed in large numbers and fought and died for broad political principles. The fight against the Nazis, the worldwide mobilization against the Nazis, the civil rights movement in the United States, the anti-colonial movement in terms of the Vietnam War, where millions of Vietnamese mobilized to defeat the American military in that part of the world. And so, I mean, human history, we wouldn't be here, so I submit, if indeed people were not broadly concerned about what the truth is. We're not broadly concerned about what fairness is and what justice is. And, we see a worldwide movement for right now, for instance, with regards to Israeli policies in reference to Gaza. So there's that. Now, you're correct in that the truth requires some objective metric you have to measure against. And so my point earlier about the elevation of humanity, now, that is the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment is predicated on the idea that the whole of humanity can be elevated, be more educated, be given the basis to thrive, where human solidarity is the norm, fairness, kindness, right? This world is indeed possible. And the debate within the Enlightenment is about how to achieve that world and how to bring it closer to reality. Now, you can take the anti-Enlightenment tact, which in the first instance simply says, look, there is no such thing as justice. That notion of, again, everyone thriving collectively, oh, that's just a religion, you say derisively. Okay. So the anti-Enlightenment says, all you can have is stability. Precisely because, as you point out, you have a very cynical view of people. Oh, everyone's just self-interested. Even toxically so. So what we need is a state to impose order, stability, right? And if democracy is the means to impose order, fine. If dictatorship is needed, fine. If mass repression is needed, fine. Because again, in terms of the anti-Enlightenment, the only metric is one of stability. No justice, no humaneness, no fairness, just stability. Now, if you take the most toxic manifestation of the anti-Enlightenment, it says, well, only white people should thrive, or Christians, non-Jews, white Christian non-Jews should thrive. Everyone else is a threat to us, right? So stability is predicated on a caste system. So the point in all of this is that is what truth is measured against. In other words, are you in the Enlightenment? Is the goal of everyone to collectively thrive, right? Is that the goal? Then truth is going to be measured one way in that context. If the other broad context is, well, no, only stability, then truth is going to have a different meaning in that context versus the most toxic manifestation of the anti-Enlightenment, right? But so, I mean, you're correct. I mean, I think you're ultimately correct when you say that there has to be some objective against which ultimately we're measuring all of this against. And and then the other point I want to make is simply to frame your comments within the real big issues facing humanity. Is it going to be enlightenment? Are we going to strive for collective well-being, collective thriving? Or is it the fact that we can only strive for stability and that's all that matters? And whatever means one uses to establish that stability, racism, repression, gulags, death camps, right? Whatever is necessary to establish stability, then that's what's going to be done, right? So again, I just wanted to frame, you brought up some interesting issues, and I just wanted to give the broader frame, and again, just referring to the idea that truth is relative to each one of these broader political projects that I put forward. Thank Thank you very much.
Thank you, George. Terry.
Mostly I just wanted to say, Christina, congratulations. I am so delighted to hear that they were able to cure your cancer, especially after a long term like that. Frankly, I've heard stories similar to that in the past. And this is the first time where I've heard the person telling me the story was right there in front of me, looking healthy and doing well, because usually the stories have been from people who did not get that opportunity. So the monoclonal antibodies are a very powerful technique and a very new in the overall scheme of things. So I'm just very impressed that they were able to do this for you, and I'm happy that you were able to recover. Yeah, it's and that leads me to a comment about science. When we talk about the opinions, I and Michael, for instance, are people who are very much immersed in our entire lives in scientific approach, and it has its flaws. You've heard me talk about superstrings. Oh yeah, it has its flaws. But one of the things it does to you is it shows you a network of mutually reinforcing facts that are so detailed and so complete in some areas, like some of chemistry, some of the medicinal things, one of those areas where you do that you just don't see it the same way. You see you see the work of the people in it. You see humans who care about other humans, who have spent their whole life, like the lady who got the Nobel Prize lately for the vaccines, just trying to make something better. And very often, this is the odd thing about scientists, very often they do it because they want to help. Many of them do it just because they like the getting into it, but many are really, really focused on saying, how can I make something better, especially in the medicine thing. But so I don't know what to say with it other than that you can't convey that directly easily, because you have to see that network, you have to see that elaboration, you have to see the papers, you have to meet all those people, you have to see the intent and the care before you really start getting a feel for why you said, yeah, I should trust these people on what we're doing. And it's unfortunate that our world is so complicated that instead we can have just, as Roland mentioned, the insane marketing can be just as powerful with the little blurb. It says, technically true that this and that is that, but hides so many incredibly important details. So we all have opinions. Science is part of it, and I go back to my previous statement, just so incredibly important to have respect for other people, even the ones you don't like, even the ones you intensely don't like. And I find myself constantly struggling to say, as I watch this terrible demise of our Republican Party in our country, because it is a demise, it is an utter destruction of so many people and friends that I've known, to watch this all just go down the tubes. I mean, my sister's worked for Republican senators, one of my bosses, one of my jobs. Rumsfeld created one of the jobs I worked on. To watch this destruction of everything that this party used to stand for is just horrifying and terrifying. And yet at the same time, we go like, well, why do people keep believing these things that are so poorly backed up? And my own sister-in-law, I remember talking to her, she had studies. She said, oh yeah, there's thousands of studies. And every time I tried to poke them, I said, well, have you read any one of them? Have you looked up that link? Have you actually checked it? No, I haven't, but everybody says that's true. And I don't know, it's the internet is a frightening thing sometimes, because it is put on steroids, the ability to make an opinion that has no basis on a background of facts and reinforcing things and good intent. They can just put this whole illusion in front of you. So I'll leave it at that. But again, Christina, I'm so happy to hear that you had that good result, and it just delighted me to see you standing healthy. That's great. That's great.
Absolutely
That's
right. Thank you, Terry. Thank you. Thank you very much. Roland.
Yeah, that's a couple of things. I just thought I'd catch up. comment on what Terry's just said, actually, because I remember I haven't participated in online sort of philosophy discussions now for some time, but I think I started talking to people online about philosophy in about 2006 or 7. And one of the things that a sort of question that kept on popping into my head, people would say all sorts of stuff. And the question that I would often come up with was, how did you get to know this thing you've just said? And I was quite initially. I was quite naive, I suppose, at the time, what I might get from conversations like that. But what I found was that people would either generally get very angry, or they just vanish. They stop talking. Because I learned that a lot of opinions people have are not actually derived from anything they've experienced at all, but basically from something that someone's told them. And so when you actually ask them, well, what did you have to do to know this? They hadn't got anything. And yeah, I repeatedly, I must have used that question on hundreds of occasions in conversations, and hardly ever got any response saying, well, I did this, and this is how you could come to this opinion. It just wasn't there. Because I think a lot of opinions that people express online are just things that they've read in books, or someone's told them, or they've seen a video, and that's it. So if that's the mindset of someone who is trying to establish knowledge that is of use to them in some way, then they're obviously going to be very easy to manipulate with other opinions. So, you know, they're basically waiting to be programmed into viewpoints. So that's kind of interesting, and possibly the internet makes it easier for that to happen. And I've often wondered whether I mean, over the last 20 years, I've noticed in education, there's been a very strong push towards critical thinking and reasoning, which are both fantastically useful skills. But the thing that has been not pushed is experimentation. So if you feed information to someone and then tell them, yeah, critically think about it, then they will reach conclusions based upon the information or data that they've started with. But of course, they're not primed, they're not set up to challenge whether that information they've started with is any good. And so there is this danger, I think, in that way of thinking of being overconfident in one's conclusions, because the basis of the assumptions one's working for has not been examined. And that's a difficult one, particularly nowadays when there is actually quite a lot of what would I call it? Opposition to the idea that the individual can experiment. Often it's regarded as an accurate way of doing things. You know, you have to rely upon expertise. You have to rely upon specialists who can investigate things properly and present information and evidence to you that is reliable, and then you can reason from that. There's a very interesting hole in that whole process, I think, which encourages people to simply work with fed assumptions, and that's a very dangerous state on one level if you're looking for people to develop opinions that are actually grounded in some kind of experience and that work, and that definitely work. So that's one thing I want to say. The other thing I wanted to say was what Michael picked up on, which was about being influenced by opinions. When I was talking earlier, I didn't want to convey, and it's very easy to do this by accident, I didn't want to convey any idea that being influenced was either good or bad, because I wanted to try and keep ethics out of it. As one of the threads I felt has run through this discussion as well is that opinion and ethics have been blended together. I think George has made that quite clear with his idea of the elevation of humanity, which to my mind is an ethical point of view. It's not, it doesn't describe how opinions work, which is what I'm more interested in. It describes what opinions one ought to have. So I'm just interested, I suppose, in how it works, how influence works, and how opinions become formed. That's, I suppose, the basis of what I was talking about. So I wasn't trying to express any opinion about what opinions were good or bad. Just what it was like. And the other thing I wanted to mention was about the geocentric model, which of course is incredibly useful. I'm a sailor, and celestial navigation is entirely based upon a geocentric position with a fictional celestial sphere. And it's fantastically useful and works extremely well. And obviously is completely different from the heliocentric model. So yeah, anyway, I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ron. Thank you. George.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on Terry's point about the Republican Party. And so, we could talk about the sociology of this shift to the right in terms of the public embracing the new political theory of the Republican Party. But I think it's worthwhile, given what you said, to just take a moment. And again, this comes to the question of truth and opinion. In that the Republican Party historically, if you look at the Republican Party through the Cold War into really the Trump era, the argument of the Republican Party was that the way to achieve enlightenment, the way to advance society, was through free markets, was through the profit motive. This is going to forward technology. This is going to improve institutions. This is all in the main going to make us better. And the difficulty the Republican Party ultimately has confronted, again, this is in terms of political theory, is that what we're seeing in practice matter is the practice of small number of people having immense amounts of wealth and the displacement of tens of millions of people. So in other words, the idea that the market, the free market, private capital, profit is going to lead us to nirvana. This, in the broad mind, I think has been dropped. And now just the turn is more the anti-enlightenment and the idea that we need to mobilize around maintaining stability and order. And this brings us to the Nazi kind of arguments, which is that in this new order, certain kinds of people will benefit. Right? We're going to privilege certain other kinds of people, and other people are deemed dangerous. They're going to be lesser than. But that's the new political theory seemingly driving the Republican Party. So it is an abandonment of the Enlightenment. It is an embrace of the anti-Enlightenment. And in so doing this, right, it's abandoned the idea of truth in terms of looking at empirical reality. The empirical reality no longer matters. It is simply the mobilization of hate that matters. And I think this is what you're running up against, in that you're engaging people because you are, to put it their way, you're in a reality-based world where they're in a world now where truth and reality are the function of public relations and other kinds of disingenuous machinations. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Terry.
Well, it's 4 o'clock and I'm going to have to be going. So I just wanted to say a quick thank you to everybody. Terry, you should definitely come back because you got quoted, I think, more times than any other person. I think about 10 different people referenced to what you were saying. So interesting comments from that. And everyone else, Michael, we'll have to talk about superstring theory sometime. So great having the session, Ron, and see you guys later.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Hey,
Very
bye,
good.
everyone.
Very good to see you all, and I'll see you in where are we now? See you in May.
And Ron, please, could you email the chat?
Can I do the what?
To email the chat of our discussion.
Oh yes, yes, of course. Anybody who wants it, and we're on YouTube. You can see the whole thing again. You want to sit through 3 hours, or you don't have to. You can do it in bits, like 20 bits, till next month. So yes, anybody who wants it, please contact me, and you can see it, whatever you want. So goodbye, everybody. It was great. Very nice
Thank you
seeing
very
all.
much.
All
Thank
the very
you.
best to all
Bye.
of you. Bye.